Tonight, we step into a tale that lingers like a shadow across history. A story not written in polished books, but carried down through broken whispers, scattered journals, brittle letters, and the frightened recollections of those who claimed to witness its dreadful unfolding. This is the tale of the Ashford curse. In the fading autumn of 1851, deep in the rolling hills of northern England, there stood Ravenwood Hall, ancestral seat of the Ashford family. Though the Ashfords were not born into nobility, decades of sharp dealings in coal, textiles, and the booming industries of the Revolution had swelled their coffers. Ravenwood itself stood as their monument, a vast Victorian mansion of stone and timber, tall glass windows glittering in the pale light, chimneys rising into the clouds like accusing fingers. The master of Ravenwood was Charles Ashford, a man in his mid-40s, whose stern face bore the weight of ledgers and contracts more than laughter. His hair had begun to silver at the edges, and deep lines carved his eyes and mouth. Respected widely for his business sense and the just treatment of his workers, Charles was admired rather than loved to stint. Orderly, a man who valued accounts over affections. His wife, Alina, nearly a decade younger, had once been the pride of London's gatherings. She had entered marriage with bright hopes of love and companionship, but found her peace instead in gardening, charitable duties, and most of all, in her son. That son was Henry Ashford, the light of Ravenwood Hall. At 23, he was tall, handsome, bearing his father's sharp jaw and his mother's soft, kind eyes. Unlike Charles, Henry brimmed with warmth and charm, winning hearts wherever he went. A Cambridge scholar, he had returned with ambitious visions, new ways to uplift the family's enterprises and better the lives of their workers. On the night of September 18th, 1851, the Ashfords hosted a grand dinner. The occasion, Henry's engagement to Clara Whitmore, daughter of a neighboring landowner. For once, it was not just an arrangement of status, but a genuine love match, nurtured since childhood and blossomed over the years. Inside the dining hall, Ravenwood glowed with radiance. Crystal chandeliers poured golden light across the polished mahogany table. Silverware gleamed. Porcelain china sparkled, a gift passed down from Elena's own mother. Footmen in crisp attire moved silently, pouring wine, clearing courses. Around the table sat the Whitmores, the county vicar, the town mayor, and other local dignitaries. Laughter and toasts filled the air, all wishing health and joy to the young couple. Henry sat proudly beside Clara, their hands brushing secretly beneath the table. She wore pale blue silk, golden hair adorned with tiny white flowers. Every whispered word between them drew quiet smiles, every shared glance a promise of devotion. At the head of the table, Charles Ashford raised his glass, a rare softness breaking his stern mask. To Henry and Clara, he declared, his voice firm and deep, may their union bring many sons to carry the Ashford name. Glasses rose in cheer, echoing the sentiment. Yet in that moment, as laughter rippled across the grand hall, Elena's smile faltered. A shadow crossed her face, old, buried fear she alone carried. For behind this joyous celebration lay a secret both she and Charles had long dreaded. As dessert was being served, towering Charlotte Russ, that the cook had proudly prepared an uneasy stir, broke the warm laughter of the hall. The butler appeared at the door, his face pale, his voice less steady than usual. "Forgive the interruption, sir," he said, bowing toward Charles. "But there is a man at the entrance who refuses to leave. He insists his matter cannot wait." The room fell into silence. Charles's expression hardened. "Who is this man?" "Jenkins." The butler hesitated. "He gave no name, sir. His manner is unsettling. He claims a debt must be settled tonight." For the first time that evening, Elena's hand froze upon her wineglass. The color drained from her cheeks. Charles's jaw tightened. "Tell him I will see him in my study within 10 minutes, he replied, his voice composed but cold. "Yes, sir." Jenkins bowed again and withdrew. Turning to the guests, Charles forced a polite smile. "Please, enjoy your dessert. Business, I'm afraid, observes no hour of courtesy." He rose from his chair. Elena's hand caught his wrist, her eyes wide with unspoken dread. "Charles," she whispered urgently, "don't go." He pressed her hand gently. "It is nothing, my dear. Likely a wandering peddler, hoping to take advantage of our celebration." But though his words were calm, his shoulders were taut with unease. Henry had noticed the look in his mother's eyes, the fear she had failed to conceal. As his father stepped into the hall, Henry murmured to Clara, "Excuse me a moment, love." He quickly followed. At the foot of the grand staircase, Henry caught up. "Father," he called softly, "what is this about?" Mother seemed terrified. Charles turned, his face stern. "Return to the table, Henry. This does not concern you." Henry's voice was steady but firm. "If it involves our family, then it does concern me. I'm no longer a child to be dismissed." For a long moment, the two men faced one another beneath the painted portraits of their ancestors. Finally, Charles sighed, his resolve breaking. "Very well. Perhaps it is time you learned the truth. But say nothing until this meeting is over. Come." They entered the studio wood-paneled chamber, thick with the smell of tobacco and polished oak. The fire crackled low in the hearth. Keen, behind the desk stood a man unlike any Henry had seen at Ravenwood before. Tall, lean, his skin bronzed from years beneath foreign suns. His dark hair streaked with gray and tied back. He wore a long coat and high boots. His face bore the lines of age, but it was his eyes, black, depthless, reflecting the fire like shards of cold that froze Henry where he stood. "Mr. Ashford," the stranger said with a slight bow, his accent carrying the faint cadence of Eastern Europe. "I see you've brought your son. Good. That is fitting." Charles's tone was clipped, sharp. "State your business and be brief. I have guests waiting." The man smiled, though no warmth reached his eyes. "My name is Victor Dragomir. I come on behalf of my grandmother, Katerina Dragomir, who once struck a bargain with your father, Edward Ashford." Henry glanced at his father, confusion mounting. Charles's face had turned to stone. "I know the name," he said darkly. "What of it?" Victor slowly produced a worn leather book from his coat. "Tonight marks 70 years since that bargain was sealed in blood and by oath. I have come to remind you of its terms. Charles's voice sharpened. Whatever dealings my father had with your grandmother ended with him. I owe you nothing. Victor's thin smile vanished. The debt does not die, Mr. Ashford. It travels from father to son, as surely as your family name. The price of failing to honor it is already written. He set the leather book upon the desk and opened it with deliberate care. Inside, Henry glimpsed faded ink, his grandfather's hand scrawled across yellowed pages. This, Victor said softly, is the record of the bargain. Your father promised wealth and prosperity, guaranteed through my grandmother's power. In exchange, he was to return a particular item after 70 years, on this very night, at this very hour. Charles's jaw tightened. I know what it says, and I have prepared what was promised. You'll have it tomorrow. Victor drew out a silver pocket watch, its face glowing in the firelight. That is not acceptable. The agreement is precise payment must be made tonight, on the 70-year mark, at 9 o'clock exactly. He glanced at the watch. In 7 minutes. For the first time, Henry saw fear flicker in his father's eyes. I need more time, Charles said, his voice low, almost pleading. The item is not here. It is secured in the bank vault. Victor shook his head slowly. Then I suggest haste. The debt is not settled by the stroke of 9. His gaze shifted toward Henry. You already know the consequence. Heavy silence filled the room. Henry's stomach tightened, a cold weight pressing into his chest. Father, he whispered, what is he talking about? What bargain? What consequences? Charles turned to him, and for the first time in Henry's life, his father's composure faltered. The stern mask slipped, revealing raw fear. Henry, Charles said, his voice strained, go to your mother. Tell her the guests must be excused, then go to my chamber. Behind the wardrobe's false panel, you'll find a small iron box. Bring it to me at once. Do not open it. Do you understand? Henry nodded, though his mind spun with questions. Victor's voice followed him as he reached the door. Perhaps you should know what awaits you should your father fail. 70 years ago, your grandfather stood on the edge of ruin. Desperate, he turned to my grandmother, who had abilities. She restored his fortune, but nothing is given freely. The price was clear. If the promised object was not returned, the firstborn son of every generation would die on his 24th birthday. Henry froze. His own 24th birthday lay just 2 months ahead. This is madness, he said, though the tremor in his voice betrayed him. Curses are children's tales. Victor's gaze hardened. Are they? Ask your father about his brother Thomas, the uncle you were never told about. He reached 24 and died screaming 3 words with his last breath. Henry turned back to his father. Charles's face was ashen, aged in an instant. His lips trembled, though he spoke only one command. Go, Henry, now, and bring me the box. Victor rested his hand upon the leather-bound book, his eyes glinting in the firelight. His voice was calm, yet each word carried the weight of inevitability. 70 years ago, he began, your grandfather, Edward Ashford, stood on the edge of collapse. His businesses faltered, his debts mounted, and ruin closed around him. In desperation, he sought the help of my grandmother, Katerina Dragomir. She was no ordinary woman. Some called her a mystic, others a witch, but Edward believed in her power, and with good reason. Henry leaned forward, disbelief etched across his face. Victor continued. Through her intervention, the Ashford fortune was restored. Your mines prospered, your factories expanded, your coffers overflowed. Ravenwood Hall itself, this grand house, was built from the wealth that followed, but nothing is given freely. In exchange, Edward swore to return the sacred relic. He had been entrusted with the relic my family guarded for generations. He was granted 70 years' grace. Tonight marks the end of that bargain. Charles's hand gripped the desk, knuckles white. And if the relic is not returned, he asked, though he already knew the answer. Victor's gaze slid toward Henry. Then the bloodline pays. The pact is very clear. The firstborn son of the Ashford family will forfeit his life upon reaching his 24th year. The words struck the air like a hammer. Lena's distant fear, the strange unease at the banquet table, all suddenly made sense. Henry felt his chest tighten, as though invisible hands were closing around his throat. "My 24th birthday," he whispered, his voice trembling. "It's only 2 months away." Victor snapped the pocket watch shut with a metallic click. "Then you understand the urgency. The relic must be placed in my hands tonight, or the curse will claim what it is owed." The fire crackled in the silence that followed. Henry turned to his father, searching for denial, for some reassurance that this was madness, superstition, a cruel joke. But Charles did not speak. His eyes, shadowed with guilt, told the truth Henry dreaded most. Finally, Charles rose abruptly. "Henry, go fetch the iron box from the hidden chamber behind my wardrobe. Bring it here at once. Do not question me, and do not open it." Henry hesitated, heart pounding. "Now, Henry," Charles barked. With a final glance at Victor's cold smile, Henry hurried from the room, the echo of his father's command still burning in his ears. Henry's footsteps echoed along the dim corridors of Ravenwood Hall. The laughter of the guests from the dining room now felt distant, offerdas, though the house itself had sunk into a heavy silence. Every shadow seemed to stretch longer, every creak of the floorboards a whisper of something unseen. He reached his parents' chamber and shut the door behind him. The room smelled faintly of lavender and candle wax, the perfume his mother favored to mask the dampness that often seeped through the old stone walls. For a moment, Henry simply stood, staring at the great oak wardrobe that loomed against the far wall. His father's words echoed in his mind. Behind the wardrobe as false panel, UL, find a small iron box. Bring it to me at once. Do not open it. Henry gripped the brass handles and pulled. The wardrobe groaned as it shifted, revealing a faint outline of a hidden door in the paneling. With effort, he slid it aside. Dust billowed into the air, making him cough. And there it was, an iron chest, squat and heavy, its surface blackened with age. Strange markings were etched into the lid, their meaning lost to time. Kneeling, Henry wrapped his hands around the handles. The box was far heavier than he expected, as though it contained not just metal, but the weight of generations. Muscles straining, he dragged it into the open. A faint chill seemed to radiate from it, raising goose flesh along his arms. He paused, staring at the lockless seam. Curiosity gnawed at him. What was inside this thing that had terrified his father, that had drawn the Dragomirs across decades and oceans? For a moment, his hand hovered at the edge of the lid. But his father's command rang again in his memory. Do not open it. Exhaling shakily, Henry forced himself to stand. He slid his arms beneath the handles and lifted with a grunt. The box was almost unbearable to carry, but he staggered toward the door. As he stepped into the hallway, the sconces flickered violently, though no wind stirred. The house seemed to groan around him, old timbers shifting as though in protest. Henry clenched his jaw and quickened his pace, the box weighing down like a curse in his hands. By the time he reached the study once more, his shirt clung damp to his back, and his breath came ragged. He set the iron box down heavily upon the rug, the thud reverberating through the chamber like a final drumbeat. Victor's eyes gleamed at the sight. At last, he murmured, almost reverently, "The vessel returns." Henry swallowed hard, stepping back. "Father, what is this thing?" Charles did not answer. His gaze remained fixed on the box, his face etched with dread. Charles lowered himself to his knees beside the iron box, his hands trembling as they touched the cold surface. For a long moment, he simply stared at it, as though summoning the courage to lift the lid. Victor stepped forward, his voice smooth but commanding. "Open it. The time for secrets has passed." Charles hesitated, his lips tightening. Then, with a sharp breath, he slid the lid aside. The hinges shrieked like a dying animal as the box opened. Inside, swaddled in rotting velvet, lay a small stone idol. It was no taller than a man's forearm, yet it seemed to dominate the room. Carved from black basalt, the figure was grotesque as face, twisted in a perpetual scream. Its eyes hollow pits that drank in the firelight. Strange symbols wrapped around its body in spirals, pulsing faintly as though alive. The moment the idol was exposed, the fire in the hearth guttered low, and a sharp draft swept through the study, though every window was shut. Henry staggered back, his stomach lurching with sudden nausea. Victor's expression shifted. For the first time, his rigid composure cracked into something feverish. His eyes widened, almost glowing, and a faint smile twisted across his lips. "Yes," he whispered. "The Dragomir Stone, my grandmother's legacy, the heart of your fortune and the seal of your doom." Henry's breath quickened. "Okay, this thing built Ravenwood. This is what gave us everything." Charles's voice broke with bitterness. "Your grandfather believed it was his salvation. He never saw it for the curse it was." Victor's gaze snapped to Henry. "And now the debt is due. 70 years of prosperity, paid with blood. If the idol is not restored to us, your line ends with you." Henry felt the weight of the words sink into his bones. His eyes locked on the idol, the carved mouth frozen in a scream that seemed almost to echo in his mind. The room felt smaller, darker, as though the idol itself was drawing the very life from the air. Lena appeared in the doorway then, her face ashen. She had followed despite Charles's orders. At the sight of the idol, she pressed a hand to her lips, stifling a cry. "Charles, you promised me this day would never come." Charles turned to her, his eyes hollow with guilt. "I thought I could stop it. I thought I could protect him." But the idol sat between them all, silent yet throbbing with an unseen power, a relic of a bargain no one could escape. For a long moment, no one in the study dared breathe. The Dragomir Stone sat upon the desk, radiating a suffocating presence. Its carved features seemed to shift in the flickering firelight, the hollow eyes staring directly into Henry's soul. Then, without warning, the flames in the hearth roared violently upward, casting twisted shadows across the walls. The chandeliers rattled overhead, and a deep, guttural hum vibrated through the floorboards of Ravenwood Hall. Henry staggered back. "What's happening?" Victor's smile widened. "The Pact stirs. The idol knows its time has come." Lena clutched her son's arm, her voice breaking. "Charles, do something. Stop this." But Charles's face was ashen. "It's too late. The curse has been awakened." Suddenly, a sound echoed through the mansional at first, then rising into a well that made the glass tremble. It was not the cry of the wind, nor the groan of timber. It was a human scream. Henry's blood ran cold, that came from the dining hall. The door burst open. Gingans, the butler, stumbled inside, his face white as chalk, his eyes wild with terror. "Sir, the guests, they collapsed." He was shaking violently, clutching at his chest as though the very breath had been stolen from him. With a strangled gasp, he fell forward onto the carpet, lifeless. Alina screamed. Henry dropped to his knees beside the butler, but it was no use. The man was gone. Victor stepped calmly toward the idol, his shadow stretching long and crooked. "This is only the beginning," he said, his voice almost reverent. "The idol claims what it is owed. If the debt is not paid, the curse will not stop at your guests. It will take this house, this bloodline, everything." Henry's heart pounded like a drum. He looked to his father. "There has to be another way. Tell me you have a plan." Charles closed his eyes. Grief and guilt etched into every line of his face. "The only way to end this is to return the idol to the Dragomirs tonight." Victor's smile returned, thin and sharp as a blade. "At last, you understand? Hand it over, and perhaps your son will live to see his next birthday." Henry's gaze shifted back to the stone idol. Its carved mouth seemed wider now, as though savoring his fear. And in its silence, Henry felt it whisper into his mind words he could not fully hear, but which chilled him to the core. The curse had awoken, and it was hungry. The study was thick with dread, the air so heavy Henry felt as though he were drowning. The idol sat in the center of the desk, its stone surface pulsing faintly like a beating heart. Every few seconds, a tremor passed through the floorboards of Ravenwood, as though the house itself groaned in pain. Victor circled the desk slowly, his gaze fixed upon the idol. For 70 years, this relic has fed your family's fortune. It gave you lands, titles, wealth beyond measure. But you clung to it like thieves, refusing to return what was never yours. Charles's voice cracked, anger and fear mingling. My father promised to return it, but he was too afraid. He thought if he kept it hidden long enough, perhaps the Dragomirs would forget. Victor stopped and looked sharply at him. We never forget. The Dragomir blood remembers every oath, every betrayal. Tonight, the pact must be completed. Henry clenched his fists. And if we give it back, will the curse end? Will my life be spared? Victor tilted his head, his smile cold and deliberate. Perhaps the idol is restored willingly, but understand this blood has already been spilled tonight. He gestured toward Jenkins's lifeless body sprawled across the carpet. The idol will not be satisfied with scraps. A price must be paid in full. Alina shook her head in horror. You lied. You never came for the idol, you came for him, for my son. Victor's dark eyes glittered. The idol chooses. It always chooses the blood that runs strongest. Firstborn sons are irresistible to it. The stone has already begun to bind itself to him. That is why the curse awakens near his 24th year. Henry's breath caught in his throat, skin prickled, and for an instant he thought he felt heat radiating from the idol, cute, pressing against him like invisible chains. He tore his gaze away, heart pounding. Charles slammed his fist onto the desk. Enough. Take the idol and leave us. Do not set foot in Ravenwood again. Victor leaned forward, his face close to Charles's, his voice low and venomous. Do you still not understand? The idol is not an object to be traded. It is a covenant. Okay? You cannot simply hand it over and wash away the curse. Okay? The pact binds the Ashford line until the blood debt is fulfilled. Henry's throat tightened. Then what do you want from us? Victor finally straightened, his smile stretching unnaturally wide. I want what was promised. I want the firstborn son. Alina gasped, clutching Henry as though her grip alone could shield him. And at that moment, the idol's hollow eyes flared with a dim, sickly glow, casting jagged light across the study walls. The glow in the idol's hollow eyes grew brighter, casting the room in a sickly green haze. The air thickened, heavy with the scent of burning stone and iron. Henry felt a sudden heat spread across his chest, sharp and searing, as if invisible claws had raked his skin. He staggered back, clutching at himself. Father, something's wrong. When he pulled his hand away, Alina gasped. Etched across his skin, just above his heart, was a faint symbol, the same spiral carved into the body of the idol. It pulsed faintly, in rhythm with the stone's eerie glow. Victor's voice was almost reverent. Ah, it begins. The idol has chosen him. The mark is the chain that binds. Soon, the boy will not belong to you. He will belong to us. No, Alina cried, pulling Henry into her arms, as though she could smother the curse through sheer force of will. Tears welled in her eyes. Charles, do something. He's our son. Charles's face twisted in anguish. He turned to Victor. There must be another way. I'll pay any price, my land, my fortune, my life. Take me instead. Victor's cold smile lingered. The Pact does not accept substitutions. It was written in your grandfather's own hand. Firstborn son. That is the price. That is the law. Henry's chest throbbed again, harder this time. He cried out, collapsing to his knees as the mark burned like fire beneath his skin. Shadows coiled out from the idol and slithered across the floor, reaching toward him like living tendrils. Alina screamed and tried to shield her son, but the shadows passed through her, curling around Henry's arms and neck. He gasped, his body convulsing as if something unseen were pulling at his very soul. Charles rushed forward, gripping his son's shoulders, fighting to tear him free. Stay with me, Henry. You're stronger than this. But Henry's eyes rolled back, his breath ragged. For a moment he saw visions, dark forest, blood-stained altars, men and women screaming in agony as the idol fed upon them. He heard voices chanting in a language he did not know, yet somehow understood. The blood is the key. The blood is the debt. Henry's head snapped forward, and a scream tore from his throat, inhuman, echoing through the hall like thunder. Victor stepped closer, his voice calm, almost soothing amidst the chaos. Do not resist it, Henry. The more you struggle, the tighter the chains will bind. Accept the mark. Accept your fate. Henry collapsed onto the carpet, trembling, sweat dripping down his face. The glowing symbol on his chest flared once more, then dimmed, leaving him gasping for air. The shadows withdrew, curling back into the idol, though their presence lingered like smoke. Silence fell over the study, broken only by Henry's ragged breathing. Lena cradled his head, sobbing, "Please, someone help him." Victor's smile returned, sharp and cruel. No one can help him now. The idol has tasted his soul. The countdown to his death has begun. The fire in the hearth died completely, plunging the study into an unnatural darkness. Only the idol glowed faintly, its twisted face casting warped shadows across the walls. Every flicker of its sickly light made the carved mouth seem wider, as though it laughed silently at their despair. Henry lay trembling in his mother's arms, his breath shallow, his skin pale as wax. The mark on his chest pulsed faintly, each throb pulling more strength from him. Elena's sobs filled the room, her trembling hands stroking his damp hair. Charles stood frozen, torn between rage and terror. Victor, if this continues, it will kill him tonight. What must be done to stop it? Victor's expression was calm, almost satisfied. The idol feeds. That is its nature. If you wish to delay your son's death, it must be sated. A life for a life, a sacrifice to appease the stone. Elena's head snapped up, her eyes burning with fury. You monster, you would have us kill. But her words cut off as a sound rose from the hall again. Another scream, then another. Faint at first, then swelling into a chorus. The voices of their guests, crying out in terror. Charles rushed to the door and flung it open. The corridor was filled with chaos servants, collapsing, guests clawing at their throats as if choking on unseen smoke. One man fell to the floor, his eyes wide and glassy before life slipped away. The curse was spreading. Victor's voice slithered through the darkness behind him. The idol will not wait. Choose someone, a fur, a soul, or everyone in this house will be consumed before dawn. Henry stirred weakly, his voice hoarse. No, I won't let anyone die for me. He tried to rise, but the strength left his body and he fell back against his mother. Charles turned back into the study, his face hollow with despair. His gaze fell on the lifeless body of Jenkins, still sprawled across the carpet. A thought, desperate and unholy, whispered at the edges of his mind. A sacrifice, a life for a life. Slowly, Victor nodded as though hearing his thoughts. The butler's death was unclaimed. The idol has not yet fed. Offer him. Let his soul be bound to the stone, and the curse will sleep for now. Alina shook her head violently. Charles, he was loyal to us, faithful to our family. We cannot desecrate him like this. But Charles's hands trembled as he moved toward the idol. If it means saving Henry. Henry's eyes flew open, pain flashing across his face. Father, don't please, don't do this. Charles gritted his teeth, his face breaking under the weight of his choice. He reached for the idol with shaking hands, lifting it from the box. The stone was cold, yet pulsed like a living heart against his palms. Victor whispered, his voice low and commanding. Place it upon the body. Let the pact drink. Alina screamed, but Charles pressed the idol down onto Jenkins's chest. The room shuddered. The candles flared to life with black flames. Jenkins's body convulsed once, a terrible scream bursting from his dead throat. Then, silence. The idol's hollow eyes glowed brighter, the mark on Henry's chest dimming slightly. Henry gasped, his breath steadying as the pain ebbed away. He lived, but Alana's sobs filled the chamber. God, forgive us. What have we done? Victor only smiled, his teeth flashing in the idol's glow. You have taken your first step. Once a family begins to feed the stone, it never stops.